welcome to Wingtalk. This is Steve. We have a big show today because we haven't done one in like a month, about 9 weeks, I would say. And so we have a special guest. We've got a big announcement, and I want to get to as quickly as possible. But first, I need to give a shout out to the pilot in charge, Mark Hoffman. Mark, how you doing?
Hey Steve, yeah, I'm here and I'm glad that we are back after some short summer break, and I'm looking forward to some great INAV related news and of course great ring talk as always.
Cool, thank you. And then of course we got Darren Lyons. Darren, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Good to be back on Wingtalk. It's been a while.
We've been absent for quite some time, yeah, and it feels like an eternity. And a lot has happened. A lot of big INAV news, and then we've got some, of course, we've asked Lee to show up today to discuss HD systems. There's been a lot of development in HD systems over the last month or two, so it's great to have him. And Lee, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Steve. Thank you for inviting me on. Great to hang out with you guys. Apologies in advance to everyone that's listening to this. I don't sound like I normally do because I seem to always have a throat infection when I come on Wingtalk. So maybe it's something you guys do. I don't know. But luckily, it isn't as bad as last time. So apologies to everyone in advance. I'm a little bit croaky, but I've got lots of stuff here to talk about HD goggles when we get to that part.
Okay, cool. Before we get to that, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects of all time. That's me. And so so I invited Lee here today because I had a conversation with Lee in June. It started off as an email exchange, and all of a sudden it was like, he was like, call me. So Lee, why did I call you back in June?
It was a slightly cryptic message from you. Obviously, we know each other from this forum and other places on the internet. And then suddenly there was this email from Steve saying, hi, keep it to yourself, but I now work for FreeSky and I'd like to talk to you about FreeSky product. And and it was kind of a wait, what? So, so that was the start of the conversation. And here we are, probably 10 videos later. For those of you that watch YouTube, you know there's only really 2 people making videos on the Ethos FreeSky system, and both of them just happen to be on Wingtalk today. Aren't we, Darren?
We are, yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty much my entire market right here. This is great. Well, first of all, thank you guys for making the content for the videos. Yeah, that absolutely did happen. I did want to say that FreeSky, or FrSky, however you like to pronounce it, has their North American distribution center and service center located about 15 miles from my home. And I've gotten to know the guys over the years. And, you know, at some point they said, you know, it'd be really great if you joined the company. And this was something that when I came into the company, I was like, you know, first 90 days, I was like, at first I was like, I can get out of this, right? I mean, I didn't want to tell anybody just in case, you know, I had to walk away with no hard feelings, didn't really want to talk about it in the future. But instead of being something that was, I don't know, not a good fit or whatever else, it was actually a wonderful fit. It was unbelievable fit. The company was much different than I anticipated. And then the other thing I was wondering about was this new tandem line. I like it. But then again, I thought the NAC was going to be the next Beatles. So, I mean, what do I know? So I really wanted to see if it was a viable product, you know, for the masses. And that's why I've been gone for the last couple months. I've been out on the road in about 8 different states talking about FreeSky products to people at club flying fields. And it's actually very viable product. There's, you know, the drone industry right now only has, well, we've got a lot of great options. We've got a lot of great affordable options. If you have a drone, you've got OpenTX, you got EdgeTX, you got Freedom TX. You've got transmitters that are very good for under $100. In the line of sight market, you don't really have that. You have 8-channel transmitters that are $500 and just a lot of very expensive options, and people are looking for alternatives. So that's how that whole thing started. But Lee, you had a perspective of the Church of FR-Sky that I really wanted people to hear. Did he go away?
Yeah, Lee.
So when we first started talking, I was a little bit reluctant to get involved because my experience with FrSky as a pilot, bearing in mind I'm a big quad pilot as well as wings and lots of other things. You know, it's a pretty broad church over here at Painless360 Towers. But the experience that I've had was I was a big FrSky fan. I had one of the first Tyrannuses, made probably 250 videos at this point about that system with OpenTX. Then the QX7 came out. It was a game changer when the Tyrannus came out, because up till then we'd all be using Futaba, Jetty, Spectrum, lots of cool radio systems, but they cost £500-600 each, and that's going back 10 years. Then suddenly this thing arrived on the planet with OpenTX. FrSky weren't the first to use OpenTX. You know, you had people like the Hobby King guys using it first, but they really captured lightning in the bottle. It was the George Lucas making Star Wars moment where they got a Tyrannus and they put OpenTX on it, and the rest, as they say, is history. And I use FrSky radios exclusively, but over the past 5 or 6 years, with the changes to AWCST version 2, with the changes to Access, with the more expensive radios and the versions of the Tyrannus that became less feature rich, it kind of left the market open for other manufacturers, people like the Jumpers and Radio Masters, to come in with their different versions of those radios. And they have really kind of taken that part of the market that FrSky was in when they first started, which is that low cost, very feature rich kind of radio that you know, kind of works very well, and it's got a great following. So FrSky to me was something that I'd kind of taken my eye off the ball, and for me, they didn't have support for the protocols that I loved. So I'm still an AWCST version 1 user. Yes, we still exist. It still works for me really well, and I don't want to change anything. I still have my Tyrannus. I still have my QX7. I still have my X-Lite. I know, Mark, you have yours there as well, and you know they're going to be worth serious money soon, and they're still the radios that I know and love. And then when we talked about it, you kind of explained some of the hardware that the FrSky or FR-Sky, depending on how you want to say it, and you can clear this up for me, Steve, how I'm supposed to be pronouncing this, how all that stuff works. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, let's get a radio in and let's start playing with it. So, you know, for those of you that watch the channel, you know, I've made some stuff, and I don't want this to sound like an advert for this, because absolutely not. I originally started very skeptically, and I was completely honest with you, Steve, when I started this. I think that's fair, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you were, you know, at first the videos were kind of like pretty skeptical. I'm like, well, Lee, okay, cool, but thanks. Yeah, and I know that maybe if you started to play with it a little bit more, you might start to like it a little bit more.
Yeah, and there was because the way the channel is, right, when you make videos, you can either do the clickbait thing and do everything's amazing and fact chart killer, right, or you can actually just be honest about how you feel about stuff. And when I started, I absolutely was skeptical. However, 3 months I've had this now, Steve, something like that. Is that?
Yeah, about 3 months.
90 days in, so it's got to be about that, right? So, right. So I'm kind of actually, you know what? There's some good stuff on here. So I'm slowly maybe thinking about having my old FrSky tattoo on my shoulder redone. You know, because it's very faded. Because I was that into the church. Because things like the tandem technology is pretty cool. The radio itself. You know, this is the kind of stuff that I was expecting to get for $700-800 from Futaba back in 2014 or something like that. You know, I could knock somebody out with this, and I probably wouldn't even crack the case. You know, this is a seriously well put together piece of hardware. So I'm still finding my way with it. Thank you to Darren for all of his fantastic videos, because you know what? His stuff has been invaluable in helping me figure out how this stuff works. But what's been interesting and exciting for me is that when I got the system, I gave Steve a list of about 12 things that I wanted from what I call modern FreeSky to differentiate it from the FreeSky from the Taranis days. And they included things like multi-protocol module support, things like CRSF support, things like the ability to have INAV scripts running, Lua scripts running on the radio. And there was this long list of stuff, a wish list, essentially from me. So I could still use my AWCST version 1 stuff that I felt I'd been abandoned about with FreeSky. And amazingly, I don't know, Steve, whether you just have, buying people lots of beer in the office, but we have seen the multi-protocol module stuff is on its way. CRSF support is there. So ELRS is now supported on the radio. And some of the things that we talked about in the early days are starting to appear.
Yeah, when I interviewed with the company, one of the questions I had was multi-protocol support, and they let me know that they were going to start working on it 3 months down the road, which is more like next year type of thing. And I said, I cannot really sell this radio if it does not have multi-protocol support, because people are going to say, does it work with Spectrum? No. Okay, then no, thank you. It's a non-starter. So what they did is they moved it up from months away, or perhaps next year type of thing, and moved it up to like 2 weeks later after I started. And that's what they did realistically, is they had to put other things on hold. They had a natural progression of how they were choosing to develop FreeSky, because this is to develop Ethos, because this was a ground up rewrite of OpenTX. It was from the same code developer who wrote OpenTX, but thinking about it, how would you make it something that's more user friendly, something for club field pilots? What would you get rid of? What would you add? And over the last year, what you're looking at is essentially something that is just trying to get up to the level where OpenTX is at right now. And it's still working on that. There are still some things we need to do. We need even more Lua support. There's a lot of nitpicky little things I can see in there that I like to have fixed. But I was fortunate to get the radio about the first month after it came out. And when I got it, I took it out of the case, looked at it, played with it a couple times, and said, oh, cool. And then zipped up the case and didn't touch it for 6 months. It wasn't really until Darren said, hey, this thing is really viable and Wizard works really well. And then I went through the nightmare of following Darren's videos and trying to update the radio back in the day when you had to go back in there and find some files off of, one section of GitHub, and then going back about a month earlier and finding a couple more files. And Darren did a great job explaining all this, but essentially what happened was it was not at all intuitive or user friendly, and I'd say over the last 6 months, I think it's just absolutely exploded, especially with the Ethos suite, where you plug the radio in and it understands what radio you have, looks at the entire radio and updates all the firmware. It gives you the option to update the firmware, the SD card, the bootloader, everything. And it's pretty much hands-free. You just say, do it, and you walk away, and 5 minutes later, it's done.
That's something that I found. I know watching Darren's videos, because again, we're bigging you up, Darren. Stay, brother. If you want to check out the Ethos stuff, please watch Darren's videos. But one thing that Darren's been making videos for a lot longer than I have, because I've only had the radio for 2.5, 3 months, and a lot of the, like you say, the very complicated route that you had to go to update and maintain the radio was one of the things that Steve and I talked about, because I said, look, I'm not interested in getting a radio in that is kind of bleeding edge. I need, because I'm the guy that answers the questions when they get asked on my YouTube videos. I don't just make YouTube videos to just make content. I actually try and help people. If I make a video that has 27 steps, like flashing an Arduino or something, to all the different libraries and things you have to do, I'm going to spend an hour every day just answering all the problems that people run into. So I was lucky. I've come into it now where the Ethos suite is now capable of pretty much doing everything automatically. And I think for me, Steve, I think you and I kind of agree a little bit on this, is that this is, if you're something like a Spectrum pilot and you're a fixed wing pilot and you're looking for something to move on to, this is actually a great option. If you're an OpenTX guy, if you're an EdgeTX guy and you love that stuff and you love Radio Master and all that stuff, you know what? If you fly loads of quads, there's probably nothing on here that's going to be a compelling event to make you move unless that radio breaks. But if you're a fixed wing pilot, the way the Ethos is built, it's really good. So doing things like setting up flaps and things like when on the throttle channel, all your stuff there for throttle hold and throttle cut is actually there on your throttle channel setup. You don't have to go into 17 places like in OpenTX and XTX to add a special function to do it, which, you know, is a bit heartbreaking for me because that's another 4 videos I could make on the system. But I love the idea that as a new pilot, the entry level is an awful lot lower. And I know some of my Patreons have converted, who tried to get on with OpenTX and just their minds were blown. And I kept going through the same steps over and over with them. And they want to fly, not become a radio expert. They've invested in something that runs Ethos. And then I get a message saying, you know what, I'm kind of good. And I think that kind of pilot, if you don't want to watch 20 videos to learn how to do basics in Open and HTX, you know, the Ethos stuff is a piece of cake to set up.
Yeah, it's something you can set up at the field too, which is something that I find to be pretty valuable, where you can actually get into the radio and can configure it and, you know, get it going. The Ethos suite will be updated to the point where you'll be able to, just like an OpenTX, be able to set up a radio and then bring it over. But you don't really need to do that because this is the touchscreen and the screens are so nice and it's pretty, it's very straightforward. One thing they did that I really like is they got rid of the input tab. And that is something where people had a lot of questions about. You had an input, mixer, and output tab. So the mixer tab is pretty much where you do all the settings and things like that. And the output tab is just showing you how things are working. And you can do things like quickly reverse servos. So absolutely compelling stuff. And you're right. I've been going out to the club field pilots, and they are beyond frustrated right now with the options they have. They're kind of they have an old Spectrum radio. They would, you know, where do they go? Do they buy a new Spectrum radio because the expensive ones are maybe questionable? $500-$600 for an 8-channel radio. They're kind of asking questions like, you know, what am I really getting for this money? And then when they look at things like Futaba, you know, they were seeing that it's just even more money and is just a great system, but can I really afford this? And then if they really can't afford it, then they certainly can't afford Jetty. And so that's kind of where all of a sudden this really does fit in a niche in the marketplace. And it is a very compelling radio system. And I've enjoyed showing it to people. I give out my business card. It has my cell phone number. I tell people, call me if you have questions. And, you know, occasionally I get phone calls, but most of the time people are getting along pretty well with it. Darren, I was going to ask you if you have any insight.
Mark's got a question quick first.
Yeah, actually, not really a question. I just wanted to add something about the radio topic in general at this point, because I am also thinking of getting one of the Horus or maybe tandem radios in the future, maybe next year or so. For example, or one thing I learned over the past years is that most people, when they decide what radio they buy, they look at the price versus the feature set, for example. They look at the specifications and what does it cost, and then often people go for the cheaper one just because it has a better specifications, and maybe for things like stick feel, for example. I did the same, and that was the reason why back in the days when I needed a new radio, I went for the Radio Master TX16S. Before that, I had an X9D, and if I compare these radios now after after I had the X9D for about 2 years or 1.5 years, and now the TX16S after 1.5 years, I have to say the the X9D, it was so beaten up, it was scuffed, it had cracks and scratches everywhere, it's fallen down so often. But beside that, I had to replace 2 of the switch sets one time. It just worked. I never had any issue with it. It was strong, it was stable, everything was fine. And then I got the TX16S, just because I bought the Max version with the alloxided, or with the red metal parts and the carbon fiber and the leather grips and all that fancy stuff. I really handled it like a raw egg all the time. It always went back into the bag, never got dirty or whatsoever. And then one single time, I accidentally dropped it on the street, because ironically, the FR-Sky neck strap I used for it went open.
Tried to kill it.
And tried to kill my radio. So it dropped one time, and since then the problems began. It starts to make noises when I squeeze a little bit. After about half a year, the roller started to fall inside the radio. Buttons were hard to press, and then I opened it up and I saw I had a few small cracks in the casing, for example, especially in the cylinders where the screws go in, for example. And then I decided I get a complete new case. Lee, you remember we talked about that, but then I decided, okay, let me just order a full set for the Radio Master case, all the plastic housing parts. I replaced everything, and while I was disassembling the radio, more and more plastic pieces just fell out of the radio. So small hair cracks all over the place in the housing. And then I found out, or then I said to me, okay, when I go for the feature set and how it feels and how it looks and how the initial new device quality is, it doesn't really matter if the long-term quality is not there. It just seems like the plastic they use it's very cheap, it's brittle, it degrades over time, it generates cracks, and then the quality just degrades over time. And this is something I have not seen on the X9D, for example, and I have not seen on my X-Lite Pro so far. I had to disassemble that one time as well, but only because the previous owner messed up the throttle alignment screws here in the back, and he screwed them in crooked a little bit, and they passed right past the lever, so I had to repair it. But you really feel the difference in build quality, and I think that's mostly the reason why this radio costs the same back in the day like an TX16S with just half the feature set. And this is one point where I have to say I might go back to the more expensive radios and maybe a FR-Sky radio in the future, and especially because the display is on top.
We'll take good care of you. And I did want to say before we change topics here that what I did, my role at the company is, well, sales and marketing, but what I do is I represent the company, FR-Sky, or as it's called, Free Sky. I did ask the owner, the guy who started the company, is known as Free Sky. I represent Free Sky to the fixed wing community, but I also represent the fixed wing community to Free Skies. So anyway, that is, if I will just end it by saying thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys coming to help out, get the word out with on this topic. And I'm available for questions and support issues and anything else that people may have. Email address is steve@freesky_rc.com, and that's how you can get a hold of me. We are going to switch over now to I was going to also mention one of the things is we actually do work on OEM projects. So I know there's a lot of people who have very interesting careers, jobs, and we do work with people like the UAV industry, and we work in very top hush-hush type things. And so if you have applications for radios, and we would certainly love to talk to you. But Lee, you're really excited right now about the HD system, and I have to admit, I really am up in the air about this. So I'm really hoping you can clarify what's going on in the industry right now with HD.
Well, we can definitely talk about that, Steve. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm only unfortunately here for the first hour, so I'm going to try and not talk at the speed of sound, so you have to listen to the podcast at half speed. But before we get into that, are you not going to mention the thing that you were going to talk about some HD news that you had over at Free Sky, or are we going to gloss over that?
Well, we do have the HD, it's called the X20S and X20 HD, which is an HD 0 built into essentially what's an X20. And I did have Carl Zhao come out one day, and I met him, and he did his really great guy. He bought us pizza lunch, and he showed us the system, and he's talking all about it. And he was saying that the HD 0 system essentially is a better system than DJI when things are moving. You can see things more clearly when you're flying. It's not as sharp when it's on the ground. That's where DJI is better. So that was his insight. The radio we have 2 demo units right now. I was just looking the other day. There's firmware we need to update. So it's not like this is a finished product right now. It's something that is out, and we will be taking orders later on this year for the product. So Lee, back to you.
Okay, so I'm just trying to put all my goggles on because I've been flying HD for a very long time. And as you can probably tell, there are a lot of options. I can't actually fit them all in my head. I own 4 different HD systems.
Wow.
I'm compensating for something, and we're not going to go there. But interestingly, only 2 of the systems I have get flown regularly, and they're the 2 on my head right now. One of them is the DJI system at the top, which came out 3 years ago now, and has really defined what hobby grade high definition FPV is for lots of pilots. And then we have the new kid on the block, the one that's been out for about the same number of weeks, which is this thing here. And what I wanted to do was, let me take all this off, because I remember the Queen, God rest her soul, was talking about the fact how heavy the crown is. And when you have all these on your head, they're heavy individually, but when you try and put them on for a bit, they get even heavier. The thing that I've struggled with is that I think lots of pilots are in the same boat as you, Steve. Is that there are so many choices now, and every video you watch on YouTube, that's not fair. The majority of videos that you watch on YouTube are quite clickbaity. And what they're doing is they're comparing one system with another. And it's really, really difficult to get a clear view with everyone's biases, right? Because some people will tell you DJI's best. Some people tell you HD Zero's best. Some people will say Walk Snail is the answer. Some people will say, no, none of that. It's OpenHD. So as a pilot who's flying analog today, how do you make a choice? So what I want to talk about, and I think if you guys want to chip in with this, is a conversation more aimed not at people who already own a HD system, right? Because if you've already invested $500-600 in your HD goggles, you've got $150 worth of air units in 10 machines. Are you then going to walk away from that investment or invest again for another $500-600 set of goggles and another $150 for those models? No, you're not. So although comparing digital system to digital system is kind of interesting, right? Because, you know, we've all seen the videos. We got DJI on one side and Walk Snail on the other, or, you know, range tests of the 2 different systems, who can fly the farthest away. The best questions I'm getting right now for the videos that I'm making are actually coming from analog pilots who are flying analog today. They've been flying analog for 7-8 years. They've got a set of fact sharks. They like analog. They want to invest in HD, but they don't want to invest in something that's going to leave them up a HD stream without a paddle in 2 years' time. Because that's kind of what's happened to a certain extent to those of us that went and bought the DJI system. They've now come out with the new system. So that's the DJI business model. So you kind of have to expect that. But I did a quick poll on my channel because somebody asked me and said, how many people still fly analog? And I said, you know what, that's a really good question. Because if you watch YouTube or go on the forums, you'd think that if you fly analog, you are in a very small minority who hasn't already bought one of these systems and zooming around in HD and putting your footage on YouTube. The unscientific reality, bearing in mind it was one sample of my audience, was that 60% of the people watching my videos are still flying analog.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is also including me, and I mean, I spoke about that very often already. Most important thing is that I fly either very small crafts like the Dart that just don't have the room to waste for a digital system. Especially, I don't have the UARTs to fly the digital system I would fly on them. And on the other hand, yeah, Lee, say something, then we can show it.
Okay, I was going to wait for you to finish. I was just getting ready. I actually have props here today. I'm prepared. This, you know, I might sound like I've eaten a cheese grater, but I've actually put some thought into it. So you're absolutely right. And one of the issues I've always had with the DJI system is the air units, even the Air Unit Lite, is a physically big device, and the hobby has worked incredibly hard to put that in lots of different places. That little board in there, you can't really, there it is actually the air unit for the warp snail system. This is my beloved Dolphin. For those of you that watch my channel, you'll know that this is my top #1 best thing to fly ever. Drop the mic, walk off stage, done, right? It is fantastic. And I really hope I haven't messed this up, because it's been an analog ship since she was built, and I've put walk snail in it. But going back to your point, Mark, is that I had to do some clever shenanigans with a flight controller so that I could have my on-screen display. And it's things like on-screen displays, how it fits into fixed wing versus quads, how it works with image quality, with range, with flying with other people at the fields. You know, lots of pilots are reviewing this stuff flying on their own. How it handles legal power levels. You know, for you guys in the States, you can run much higher power levels than we can legally in the UK. So running at 1200 milliwatts, 1.2 watts of power, getting over 30 kilometers, brilliant. But actually, if we did that, we'd probably get arrested. So it's very difficult, going back to my point, trying to figure out, you know, which horse are you going to back in this race? Because if you're going to back one, your bet has to be at least 800-900 euros, pounds, or dollars. And that is the kind of money that you don't want to risk and get caught out with.
And that's for the first plane. That's for the first plane only, these 800 euros.
Well, that will get you your goggles and maybe 1 or 2 air units. So you might, that's what I mean. 2.
Yeah, okay, maybe. So yeah, but this, as I said, the size of the air units is one point. Then of course the flight controller has to support it. Until recently, the only digital system I was interested in, because it was the only one that's closest to my needs, was HD0. But HD0 needs a hardware UART, so all the F411 flight controllers are out of scope already at this point, and everything else that I have on bigger planes are usually long-range planes. And for long-range planes, to have the VTX right behind the camera in the nose of the plane, that's not ideal for long-range flying. You want to have it out in the ring, for example. And of course, you can use longer, like SMA extensions to do that with very little losses. But anyway, currently, and I think that's the point where we can switch to our next main topic at the stage. The HD systems, all 3 of them. I just call them 3 because we have DJI, we have Voxnet, and we have HD0. Everything else is really a complete niche market. Like, how's that other system called?
Open HD.
Yes, Open HD.
Siwi or whatever it is.
Yeah, Siri also, how it's called, with the very big air units and the big ground station thing. I think these are complete niche systems at the moment. And yeah, just recently, the HD systems developed into a way where I can say, okay, they get usable now, because the last big thing that I was always missing was a proper OSD. especially if I fly long range. I want to have my artificial horizon. Not speaking about Horizon Rift yet, but I want to have it. I want my efficiency. I want my remaining flight time. I want my remaining flight distance, all that stuff on my OSD when I fly long range, or when I do cloud surfing, or when I fly above the fog, for example. When I want to land and I don't see landmarks anymore, I need a proper home arrow. HT0 were the first one who had that, although they still have the problem with the slow OSD update rate. And then Walksnake came around the corner, and in just a few months, they officially support INAV now. There are some things to do on the INAV side still to make it 100% compatible. They have still some issues with the OSD, but they have a full-blown, officially supported OSD in their goggles right now. Darren and a lot of other guys are working on HD-capable OSD elements that are sharp and nice in nice resolutions instead of pixel icons. There's so much going on right now, and this is why it gets interesting. So right now, you guys know my opinion about DJI. For me, DJI FPV system is dead. It will die. It's just the community with WTF OS who try to keep it alive for a little bit longer, but for me, it's just a dying system. And right now, the decision has to be made between HT0 and Walksnake. And for me personally, I will wait for about 6 more months for the next season, and then we see how they both develop, and then I can decide what I want to go for.
So I think that's a really interesting point of view, because again, a lot of the content is being created by quad pilots and people who already have an existing investment in the HD system. Is it worthwhile us, maybe, for those listeners who maybe are in that boat, that 60 to 70% of pilots who are in the analog boat, talking at a very high level of what these systems are, what's good and bad about them, just giving a very, very broad brush approach of what we think, and then hopefully the people who are listening will have a more kind of balanced overview of which horse they maybe can think about betting. Because the thing is, we could kind of, depending on what you fly, depends on which of those systems are a better fit. Because again, I own 4 HD systems. I only fly 2. The reason is they fit me better. So for example, I want a great HD image. I want range, at least what I can get for the analog kit on legal powers. I want a system that plays well with other pilots at the field. I don't want to power my system up and take everyone else's FPV feed out. I want a system that can be installed on whoops, quads, wings, and planes. I don't want to have one system for my whoops and one for my long-range FPV gear. I want a system that supports exactly the same as you said, Mark, a full on-screen display. I want it for INAV. I want it for RD Pilot. I don't just want a basic MSP Betaflight style interface. I would like some color. That would be awesome, he says, looking longingly at Darren. I want a system that's reliable, and I want a system that's comfortable and easy to use. Now, the things that I want that I've just listed out, I also want a system that's going to be around for more than 18 months. That would be nice, right? But all those things I don't think are unusual requests. And that is why, for me, I'm still flying the DJI stuff that I've had for ages, but Walksnake is a better fit. So what do you guys think? With that context, what do you guys think if we have a chat about each of them in turn, and maybe start with our friends at HD0?
Well,
That sounds great to me.
I feel what you said, but I think that it's not so cut and dry, because I think each system is sort of targeted at a different user. So, I mean, DJI, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're dying just yet, because they've got a new system coming out. But I do agree with Mark. For me personally, they're the last system I would look at. They're too closed source. The only reason we're getting a good HD or good OSD is because there's a hack.
The community has added all of the good stuff that DJI does.
Exactly. DJI. But how will that work going forward? Unless they can jailbreak the new goggles, that's not going to happen. So it's only going to be with the legacy goggles. So the future for DJI is very cloudy at best, unless you just want to be locked into their system and you're happy with that. Then, fair enough. If that's what you're happy flying, that's what you're happy flying. Walk Snail, I can see more like a DJI, but they are listening to pilots and they are actually sort of making changes to get their system better. It's still very, very new and early days, and time will tell on that. But I think that it's more aimed towards sort of just general pilots, someone that just wants to go out and fly and have fun. And then HD Zero, they are very latency focused, and they just have that 4 millisecond glass to glass that they are trying so hard to just nail. So for me, it's more aimed at racing. Not so good image quality because of the frame rate. Not so good OSD again because they're prioritizing other things. That there's a lag on the OSD even though it's fully featured. My friend Dan, who's in the chat's got it, and he says the penetration isn't as good as even analog. So they're really just aiming that system at racing, so quad racing. I'm even thinking about it potentially for wing racing. See how things go next year. But yeah, I think that they are different markets at the end of the day, with a bit of crossover in the middle.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and that's why I've been very clear about what I want from the system and what I fly, because that really dictates what systems are going to fit. If I'm a racer, right, and I'm doing quad racing, then you know what, HD Zero is going to float my boat, and the DJI system with variable latency to preserve the image as it gets further away isn't going to be, exciting to me. Walk Snail's in the same boat. I won't care about that either. So in my videos, I'm going to talk about the fact that HD Zero is the answer and everything else is a bag of crap. However, for people like me who fly further away than 300 meters, right, who actually fly to the edge of the line of sight, fly to 400 meters in wings, then the fact that I have to wait an extra 22 milliseconds to get my image, I don't care.
Nothing.
I don't care, right? It's like, well, it's either I get a black screen or I get an extra 22 milliseconds. That's great. And you're absolutely right. HD Zero, if I grab that for a minute, Carl Zhao is a fantastic guy, right? And I love Carl. I was really disappointed that Fat Shark initially worked very closely with Carl for the HD Zero system to go on the front of Fat Shark goggles. And I was a big fan of that because this is a complementary technology to existing analog pilots, going back to what I said at the beginning. You don't have to buy a new goggle set for this. You stick this on the front of your goggles. It makes you look like you've been... what do they call it when the Borg could get hold of you and stick all bits of technology in you? Assimilated, right? It does make you look like you've been assimilated by the Borg, but then actually the DJI goggles do too. But the cool thing is this is essentially a module, and I loved the idea that I could keep the existing goggles that I had, and also it had an analog port that was built in there as well. It could do analog as well. It seemed incredibly complementary, and I was heartbroken when Fat Shark walked away from that, and we now know why, because they chose Walk Snail. But as you said, the issue with this is that in incredible low latency, as you get further away from the goggles, there's only so many RF tricks that you can use to try and maintain the link before you have to use good old what Greg at Fat Shark used to call brute force, which what he was meaning was a ton of power on your transmitter to maintain that incredible low latency. Because it doesn't do, even though you can fly 30 plus kilometers away with it if you really want to at high speed, with the high antennas and the high power levels, it's not really what it's aimed at. And I'm so disappointed that the new system, as it's come out from Walk Snail, particularly with Fat Shark being so involved in it, is that there isn't a module version, or that the goggles don't have things like an analog input. And I'm nitpicking a little bit here, but considering the majority of people who are going to buy things like Walk Snail are coming from analog, it would seem to me to have made a much more sensible way to provide those pilots with a way into HD is by giving them something like this for Walk Snail, rather than asking them to buy an entire new goggle set. Now, these goggles are nice. I mean, if you look at them, if you look at the optics, trying to do this so you can see, if you own a set of HDO2s, those optics look incredibly familiar
To be honest, so does the whole faceplate does.
Basically, there's only one. I talked to the engineer and Greg about this. There's only one difference between the optics in this and the HDO2 optics, is that in the HDO2s, because the what do you call it? The IPD adjustment is the same. So as you move the IPDs, you can see the lenses move. In the HDO2s, the way it worked for the focus adjustment, it moved the lenses, whereas in the walk snails, it moves the screens, which is actually a better way to do it. But apart from that, the lens array is the same. So if you're a Fat Shark pilot, it smells very much like a Fat Shark product with walk snail technology at the front. But it's just give me an analog. Just let me plug my TBS unit in, and then you know what?
You only need to
it would
take
have
one
been a
set of goggles.
no-brainer.
I have to say to that, I also was very disappointed when they first announced these goggles. I mean, I was disappointed back then during the announcement phase for many reasons, but especially that they didn't add any analog input. But after thinking about it for a while, to have this module mounted on front of my goggles every time I want to fly digital, so you put the module on, you put the cable on, then the cable is never the perfect length because every goggle has the HDMI port on a slightly different position. You have to twist it around, then you have the 3D print adapters, you maybe scratch your goggles when you make it removable. I have to say, no, I don't want a module. I don't even want an analog module attached to my goggles on the side like HD0 is doing it currently. What I will do when I switch to digital, I just use a second pair of goggles because it doesn't really matter. Imagine you have this module, you have an extra bag for the module, for example, to not damage it in your backpack. Or you have a little bit bigger bag where you have a second pair of goggles in there. It doesn't take up so much more space at the end. And when I fly analog, then you have this module on the side, or especially if you only have an AV input, like a jack connector, you put the module somewhere else, you have even more cables, you have to power the module, so you have cables dangling around everywhere. I just don't like that. When I go fly, I want to take my goggles, plug in power, put it on my head, and throw my plane. And that's how I like it nowadays. And so I mean, I'm not missing anything.
That's a fair point, Mark. But having that as an option is fine, which is obviously the way Walksnail have gone. But there's the other side where people basically, if they're going to buy a new set of goggles, they need to sell their old set of goggles. And if they no longer have the option to use their existing technology in the new goggles, it makes that a lot more difficult.
Of course, that's only from my point of view, personal view.
So yeah, I agree that having the goggles standalone is fine, but I think an adapter or something like the HD0 has done, I think that would be a good second option for people who don't want to change their goggles.
I tell you the thing that's probably the most important to me out of all these systems, having flown all of them. When I did my review of the HD0 system back when it was called Shark Bite, after it was called Bite Frost. If you all remember that under the Fat Shark banner. The image is not as good as DJI, right? So if you on a scale of 1 to 10, back then, DJI was the best. 50 megabit mode, it's 10 out of 10, right? And then the best analog with the best goggles and everything else, still only about 5 out of 10. The system back then when I did it, probably going back a couple of years, was like a 7 or 8 out of 10. So it was infinitely better than analog, but not as good as DJI. But the interesting thing is that the firmware on these systems, particularly the new stuff like HD0 and Walksnail, is changing quite quickly and adding new features and improving the image. The firmware for things like the DJI product, because you can always tell when DJI have basically lost interest in a product because the firmware just stops, no matter what's left, what issues they have, right? So the 0.06 was out July 2021, so it's been over a year since we've had an update for the goggles. We still don't have canvas mode. We still have issues where it defaults to 14 satellites in the on-screen display when there isn't a lock. That's one that really bugs me. Slow SD card warnings. So you have those issues. So even if you make a video today and you do a comparison, if someone changes the firmware like the WalkSnail guys are doing all the time at the moment, it isn't a valid comparison anymore because now they've changed something. And for me, this is one of the key things that I'm excited about with HD0 and WalkSnail. It's the community involvement, right? Because DJI want to sell you what they want to sell you. It's a closed proprietary system. You know they're going to walk away from you and walk away from that technology as they bring out the new. That's their business model, right? And it's very successful. Lots of people love it. And if you want to buy the goggles are amazing, but be prepared to buy another set in however many years, right? That's the way it works. However, I am excited because WalkSnail are already working with the INAV project. Oh my God, they're already, yeah, hello Darren again.
Hello.
Hello. but they're also working to make sure, so the on-screen display inside the goggles, the firmware has been recalled, and we're not going to get into that, but the firmware inside these goggles, there's the selection in the on-screen display, and the menu is beautiful in this, by the way. You can select whether it's a KISS OSD, an ArduPilot OSD, an INAV OSD, or a Betaflight OSD. And that bit, I was just so incredibly happy because it's like they're listening to what we as pilots want. It's not a case of here's a basic MSP implementation of an on-screen display. Everyone go and figure out how to make that work. Good luck. These guys are actually going away. And the reason the latest firmware has been held up is because they're going to re-release it when it has a much better integration with things like the INAV on-screen display. Where I am, guess what? I'm going to get my color graphics. I'm going to get my 720p icons. I'm going to be able to put everything in the screen where I want it to be. I'm not going to have to sacrifice any of the things that I enjoy as an INAV analog pilot if I go to WalkSnail. And that's what I also love about Carl with the HD0 system. Carl is listening. He's part of the community. He's even open source some of the technology so that developers can get their mitts on it and see how it works. That, for me, as a pilot, I get more excited about because the more involvement with the community there is, the faster the adoption, the longer the cycle. And also when future products come out, the better chance there is that when WalkSnail version 2 comes out in however many years, or they produce a module for the analog goggles, sorry, Mark, then who knows, it might still work with the existing system because if they're talking and asking people what they think, that's going to be one of the big pieces of feedback, which is don't screw me if I bought version 1. And whereas people like DJI, it's kind of, well, the technology's moved on. If you want to keep using that, use that. But here's the new version. It's shinier, it's bigger, it's sexier. You know, it's only $600. So for me, I personally am more excited about the HD0 and WalkSnail technology for that reason. Nothing to do with distance, HD performance, you know, whether or not the goggles fit, whether or not there's light leaks, whether or not the optics suit my eye, whether or not they fog up. You know what? All that stuff can be fixed. If they're talking to the community, they'll end up with a better system.
Do you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I was going to mention is that with the, I should just throw this in really quick, with the X20S HD, with the HD0 built in, what they're going to do is there's on the transmitter itself, it has an HDMI port jack out that would go into a set of goggles, so you could use the receiver built into the transmitter, if that makes sense. It's the video receiver, built into the tandem transmitter, and then you could take a HDMI goggles and put them into your goggles, HDMI cable, put it into your goggles.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to add to this topic. As I said before, for me, the decision is WalkSnail or HD0 to go digital for the next season, for next year. And the reason why I want to wait is for each system, I want to see one thing in specifically. For Walksnay, I want to see if they continue with their engagement on the community. They continue the development. They really focus on updating stuff, fixing problems, and of course, bringing hardware variety. And I think I heard, I have not seen any official posts, but I heard from others from the community that they also want to bring a module, as you said before, for analog goggles. And I'm not sure if it's just one module or even a module and some ground station option with an HDMI output. But no matter what, even if it's just a normal module for you can put on the goggles like HD0, you can also put it on an antenna tracker. And that's what I'm interested in, to just route an HDMI cable to my goggles that I already have. That would be a great option. And what I want to see for HD0 is that they manage to get more third-party manufacturers involved. Because DVMath at its own, they cannot survive on the market at this point. It's just impossible. They don't have the capacities for this fast development that's currently needed, and for all the logistic stuff. They would die if no other manufacturers comes in, and that's the point where I say have to say that I really like to see FrSky now going in, integrating HD0 into their X20S HD, bringing a dedicated monitor that you can also in theory put on a tracker with 2 SMA cables and 2 patch antennas, for example, to use for long range stuff. And I really like to see that, and I hope this. There's more of that coming in the future and over the next half year.
There has been a lot of contact with me from particularly Whoop and quad manufacturers starting to offer quads for review that are built with Walksnail and HD0 systems. And it's only happened, interestingly, it's only happened in the last 2 weeks. Before then, if it was a HD system, they would either ship you an analog setup, usually with the TBS VTX, or they ship you the DJI system. And I've already had one of the Whoops. It was a Beta FPV Meteor 75. You can get it with HD0, or you could get it with Walksnail, because Walksnail do a 1S micro board that's suitable for Whoops. I know HD0 have that kind of technology as well. But I was just really, really happy. I sat there with a stupid grin on my face when I read the email, because I was like, right, this is great, because this means that not only is there going to be the push from the people trying to sell us the goggles, there's going to be the pull from the manufacturers who are starting to embed this technology in their products. And it all helps the ecosystem become more viable. Because if you are looking at a system and then you kind of search for, I don't know, HD0 quad, and you don't get anything, right, then that might be one of those things that, you know, kind of puts you off. You're thinking, well, hang on a minute, am I backing the wrong horse? And the thing with HD0, I know we're kind of coming towards the break here. For those analog pilots who is listening to this, at the moment, I would say you need to be clear about what your requirements are and what you want out of a system, because hopefully this chat has demonstrated that actually all HD systems are not created equal. They are better at different stuff. They have different methodologies, different ways of solving the same problem. They're all significantly better in terms of the image over your standard analog flying. Even if you have the best analog setup money can buy, when you put the set of HD goggles on, the warning I'll give you is it will spoil you. If you go to the field and you fly an analog and you try somebody else's HD equipment and then go back to your analog kit, it feels like you're trying to watch, you know, going from your HD TV, your 4K TV flat panel in the lounge back to a little CRT TV that we all used to have in the kitchen when we were kids, where you had to, you know, that was where you had to go to watch your program when your parents wanted to watch what they wanted to watch on the big TV in the lounge.
You're
dating yourself.
Then I must be a freak, because I flew DJI a few times and I always was happy to go back to analog.
Well, look, you I'm not going there, Mark, because you don't want but there's always one exception. But the point I'm making for those listening is that if you are an analog pilot, despite what everyone will tell you on the internet, is there is not one better system over the other. Yeah. It is, each of them has a niche that they are good at, and when you're clear about that, and hopefully this chat has helped a little bit on that, once you understand the one that fits you better, you're more likely to make a better choice.
Totally agree. One last point, just a question from the chat from Henrik. Do you guys maybe know why in HD0 the OSD update rate is so slow? Is it a software thing, telemetry rate thing, or is it hardware limitation in the goggles that cannot render it faster? Any idea if you heard something?
As far as I can tell, it is because they are giving it a lower priority to the speed. It's because we've seen the WalkSnell system. They use the exact same MSP from INAV to the VTX, but the AHI is silky smooth on that system. So yeah. I think it is just the link. They're prioritizing the speed.
So they drop a lot of packages basically and just occasionally send one over the air.
I don't know the technicals, but yeah, that's what I think.
Does the WalkSnell work on soft serial with the full OSD?
No idea.
I am currently waiting for the next update to come out to test that. I was about to install it and they pulled it down. That's what my Dolphin is waiting for. I will be able to answer that for you.
You can still download it. There is a website. They host these also the pulled firmware, and you can still download and install it if you want.
Between you and I, I'm actually running the beta, but I'm not making. I'm not sharing any information based on a beta because invariably, I've been caught out like that before. Let's put it that way. But when it's out fully, I'll probably make a video because I'm hoping that if it works for soft serial, then all those the F411 WSE flight controllers with the DJI ability to use soft serial too, that means swapping it over will be a piece of cake. So I promise when I know that, when I've tested it with the real version, with all the fantastic work that's Darren's doing, hello Darren, then when the INAV stuff is done, I'll probably make a video all about the INAV OSD, because I think for a lot of INAV pilots, that will probably be one of the things that becomes a killer app.
Yeah, could I just say something about that, pulling the firmware? I know that a few people gave WalkSnell grief for that, but I actually think it was pretty responsible of them. There was a problem, they couldn't pull it down. It was creating a black screen on the goggles, so they pulled the firmware and said, please, go back to the last one, which I think is a responsible thing for a company to do, fix the problem, rather than just leaving people flying it and then put a patch out later. So, yeah, I think that's a positive, even though people are saying, I can't fly the latest, I'm still waiting. It's wait a little bit longer. It's all,
and especially because it happens so rarely, maybe once in like 100 flights or so, as far as I can tell from the community posts. So it's understandable that they didn't see it before in their testing. I think they still don't know what exactly causes it, right? At least that was my last information.
I don't know. I'm not that deeply involved with WalkSnell. Just to go over what has been going on, because Liam's Mark have been alluding to it. Basically, myself and a guy who you may have seen on our Discord or in the GitHub for INAV called Jetro. We've been working on the font system not the system, but the fonts for the WalkSnell HD. So in the next firmware, there'll be a full INAV font set in 720p and 1080p, all completely redrawn from scratch. The actual font files are on the INAV GitHub, so if anyone's made fonts in the past, to actually make your own custom font is pretty much the same as the analog system. So you just take a copy of the font, change what you want, and I've written a tool that will actually compile it into the format that WalkSnell use. So that's what's been going on. And also I will probably be looking at some of the stuff on the MSP side to try and get it working better with their system, but that's in a little bit in the future.
Yep, and it's got color.
Oh yeah. It's color. The new one's color.
but one thing
we got we got Crunkle in the chat, who I actually gave an early version of it to, so he could test something for me. But there was an issue with the custom font file at the moment. It only seems to do the first page and then repeat that for the second page. So that's something that needs to be fixed. But he was saying he hated going back to the the version of the font in the firmware, because the new one just looks so much better.
Just one thing to keep in mind, from my understanding, also that we can have colored items. They are not dynamically. So we can, like, you cannot switch from a white GPS symbol to a yellow one or to a red one based on the GPS, because then you have to triple these items and have them available in any color, and then also INAV should have to be adapted for that.
Yeah. I mean, what we're talking about with color, if anyone knows anything about computer graphics, the Walksnail font is using a PNG format with alpha transparency. So basically you can have full color text, images, whatever you want in there. You can have varying levels of transparency, but it's just within the character sizes. So that's where the color is. So for example, the battery indicator, when it's full, it has green indicators, and as it goes down, it goes yellow, then red, as an example.
Isn't it funny how such a basic thing as having a bit of color in the on-screen display makes so many middle-aged men happy? But it is a great example, you know, and this is a great example though of why personally I'm quite excited about the Walksnail system. It's very new. We don't know what the future holds, but the fact that this is happening with the system just makes my heart very happy. And massive thank you to Darren and the other INAV developers for getting involved with stuff like this, because ultimately it results in a better experience for us flying this stuff. So thanks, guys.
Yeah. Oh, well, with that, I think we're going to wrap up the first hour. Lee, thank you so much for being here today. We look forward to seeing you again when you get sick again in the near future. We'll have you back on. Now, I really wanted to thank you for helping with my quinceañera coming out party, and with the really very comprehensive view of Walksnail, HD0, and the DJI system. So,
yeah, Steve, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I think there has been talk of me coming on for the Halloween episode, which is next month. So
yes.
You've got about 3 weeks of being well.
Yeah, so I'm up for that. So I'm going to stock up on whiskey and lemon juice and honey, ready for that show. But I would love to come back, because actually, you know what? There's an awful lot of other stuff going on here, just to kind of whet your appetite before you go to break. I've been cutting parts using my laser cutter from plans. I've been 3D printing, don't even know what that is, 3D printing planes. And I've also been building VTOLs. So outside of the land of HD, there is a lot going on at Painless360 Tower. So I'd love to talk to you guys and ask your thoughts on some of that.
Great. Look forward to hearing all about this. We'll find out what you'd like to talk about. This sounds like a really fantastic show. Maybe you could stick around for about an hour and a half next time.
And then and then in a zombie costume for Halloween.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So with that, we're going to break. We'll see you in 3 minutes. Hey, welcome back to Wingtalk. I just want to say that, man, I really love having Lee on. He just brings an energy and insight. It's always great to have him. I feel bad that he's sick. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, of course, always fun. I mean, he is deeper into a lot of this stuff than any of us is, especially because, yeah, his channel is his job, and yeah, he has a lot of contacts, a lot of gadgets he plays around with. So he has a very good overview over everything.
Yeah, and you know, when I was talking to him about just getting started with getting the tandem radios and everything else like that, he'd say, "Steve, I need to talk to you. It'll be short," and the conversation's going for 3 hours. And he's this vivacious, jovial guy that is always, I mean, it doesn't really come across in the videos so much. I mean, he seems like a nice guy. He's pretty straightforward. I think he's trying to hit the points and get the video over with quickly. But just a guy who's absolutely passionate about the hobby and just a great guy to be around. So it's really great to have him on the show because this is, I don't know, like no other guest we've had. He brings an energy to the show that we really appreciate. Yeah. And
okay, Darren is. Yeah.
Wait, we're waiting for Darren to come back. Darren, you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. All right, so we have some big news or some big developments happening with INAV. Mark, what is going on with INAV?
Yeah, I would say development is going on, and this time in a pretty big manner. Darren, Keith, or Bonafide Pirate, and myself, we already posted a video, each of us, 3 hours before the Wingtalk started, where we talk about one of the big hopeful new features for INAV 6.0. And yeah, that's the complete fix for the famous Horizon Drift. I think this is something people are waiting for years now to happen. So
don't tease me, Mark. Is this real or not?
Yeah, it's actually real. So yeah, we have, I think, combined maybe, Darren, I would say 20-25 hours of flight time on different planes, maybe even more.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a bit more than that now after this weekend. So yeah, maybe close to the 30. But yeah, quite a lot of time has been put in, lots of different types of planes. So there's been wings, there's been tailed planes, there's been quite a range. And also Jetrol, who I mentioned about the walk snail font, has been testing on multi-rotors. So yeah, a lot of testing has been going on. This
is, I mean, first of all, you guys started talking about this in the middle of the night, and I wake up and I see all these text messages from you guys, and like, oh my God, we talked about this maybe a year ago, and we're saying it's going to cost $10,000, $100,000. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't work. And I'm like, wow, okay. And then all of a sudden, it's like fixed. And this is so hard to believe that's even true. So tell me what happened.
So yeah, what happened? I can only tell the story of one of the two developers working on this final solution, or I wouldn't call it final solution, but on this reliable solution. Let's call it that. Call it this. How it started. Julio was working on new features for INAV, for navigation stuff he wanted to do. I'm not sure what exactly he wanted to do, but it didn't work out because every time he tried his new features on his own firmware builds, he got the issue that the horizon was drifting and the plane wasn't getting its heading correctly, and the features he tried to develop needed a high precision of the sensor data for navigation. And at one point, I think it was in April or May this year, he snapped and said, okay, enough is enough. Now I have to work on this thing to get this artificial horizon, or this AHRS, the Attitude Heading Reference System, to work properly so he can work on his own features. And that's how it all started from him. So he decided to look at how Autopilot does it. He looked at the code, and then he said, okay, we can do that in INAV as well. And he started to take over everything that's needed. Of course, he had to rewrite a very big part of that because Autopilot is C++, INAV is C, different programming languages, so you cannot just copy and paste everything over. He basically had to rewrite a lot of the code and understand all the maths going on behind it. And then he built a complete new AHRS, I think the main core, in 1 or 2 weeks of work. Basically,
it was quick. I remember that on Discord. It was very quick.
Yeah, he said, "Yeah, I'm working on that." And 1 week later, okay, it's the basics are working. The basic sensors are working. Then he had to add some more stuff, like the GPS had to work, the barometer had to work properly, the heading had to work, and then he had to revert some of the weird things that the Autopilot developers did on the math to make them back to normal, how it's supposed to work, because they made strange patches for some reason. He doesn't even understand why they did that. But yeah, it took a few months then, and many programming hours for him to get everything working. And right now we are in a stage where it's nearly finished. So INAV now, with the help of GPS, can properly determine when you fly turns, how much centrifugal force you get during that turn, to determine how much accelerometer sensor data error is in the data, to compensate for that and still keep track of where down is. Long sentence, but in short terms now, INAV doesn't lose orientation in turns anymore. And this was the biggest issue why INAV navigation modes were not very reliable in the past. The thing that was done in the past was, first, the drift just happens in turns. And if you level out, it's set it by itself. But if you fly in angle mode, you constantly have to realign it manually to leave the artificial horizon time to level out again. Then the mitigations came in that just ignore the accelerometer in turns, but that's also only a half-baked solution because you cannot rely only on gyro data for a long time, especially in position hold. And this actually caused planes to crash in the past because they were put in position hold. They had noisy setups, they had electrical noise, they had vibrations from the propeller, they had vibrations from wind gusts or from airflow. And the gyro was not precise enough to keep the plane or keep the plane's attitude stable for a long time. And after a few minutes, you then see the horizon is tilting and the plane is flying along this tilted horizon, and it tilts more and more until the plane cannot keep up anymore and basically crashes into the ground. So, and this all is hopefully complete history now with the new AHRS. It already works perfectly fine in navigation modes. So even in very windy conditions, I tested it under very extreme conditions with the AR Pro at 35 to 55 kilometers per hour winds. So it's basically 2/3 of the plane's cruise speed in position hold, and I had an altitude fluctuation of 4 or 5 meters at max. Darren tested it on the coast with very gusty winds with the small AR 600, and also, was it the 900? Okay, with the AR 900. And even he had only like 2 or 3 meter deviation from the target altitude during position hold. And in any navigation modes is completely reliable. The only thing that has to be fixed right now or has to be optimized is if you like to fly aerobatics, like doing loops and rolls all the time, smashing around, this can still cause significant horizon drift, currently even more than the old INAV version. But the difference now is that if you level out the plane, it takes about 5 seconds, maybe 10 in extreme cases, until it completely recovers. And it even recovers while the plane is loitering, for example. So, yeah, that's the current state. And then we have a second developer whose name is Shota. He comes from Japan. And he also worked on something similar. He uses the same base mathematics behind it to compensate for centrifugal forces in turns, but he puts them on top of the old INAV AHRS. And his solution is also to compensate for acrobatic flying, to just use the same mitigations as before, just with higher threshold values, so they don't interfere with position hold or any navigation mode. Two completely different approaches, both work very well already, and both just need the last touch of finalization before they can be implemented. But yeah, very interesting development, and I hope one of them, or maybe both, and they can combine their knowledge about that, will make it into INAV 6.0.
Fantastic. Darren, your insight, please.
Well, to be honest, there's not really a lot to say, which it doesn't sound like a good thing, but actually it's a really good thing because nothing happened. or flew exactly the same as I would before, but the Horizon just behaved so much better. So no bad tendencies. I mean, yeah, as Mark mentioned, if you do more sporty or acrobatic stuff, the Horizon does drift, but it does come back very quickly. So Mark mentioned himself, Bonafide Pirate, and I put videos out. In my video, I do 4 rolls consecutively with the AR wing. When it stops, the AHI is off, but I pretty much immediately put it in angle mode, and it doesn't really deviate. I mean, I do turn, and then once it turns completely, the Horizon is completely back to normal. But the other thing I did was test with the F1 there, which that's a plane that I've had at 183 miles an hour. And one of the things that I wanted to test was the centrifugal force if I did a turn as fast as I could go. So I did probably about a 180-degree turn, full throttle, and it hit 160 miles an hour in this turn. But there was buffeting because of the wind, but for most of the turn, the Horizon was bang on. So it is working very well, I think. I think it's definitely a good improvement.
The one thing I would say is that looking back from where we came from as a group with INAV, I mean, from the end of 2018 to where we are right now, and this has been covered so many times before, but INAV has not been funded very well. So we do not have paid co-developers working on INAV. Sometimes people get a little extra money here and there on Patreon, but it does not compensate for the time. So, had INAV been funded like OpenTX was funded, we'd be on INAV 25 right now, and things would have been fixed a long time ago. This is what's happening. These are people who've worked on these projects without getting paid in their own free time, and we can't thank them enough. I mean, this is really something. I know I appreciate the ability to go out and fly every morning. I think everyone else has a definite affinity. If it's all possible, we'll come up with a way to show a little monetary compensation for these developers, and I hope that people will contribute to it, especially, if at all possible, the big tip jar for these guys for their hard work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the case with open source in general, I think. But to just highlight how of a good improvement this is and how things are working, Mark has been communicating a lot with Julio about what's been going on. We've all been sort of testing it, and Mark's been sort of speaking with Julio. And a few days ago, he discovered that Julio only speaks Portuguese. So everything has been done through Google Translate. So getting all this technical information through Google Translate and back again, and getting the improvements it just shows how great the world is at this point, and we can all just sort of work together.
That's interesting. You can actually use WhatsApp, and WhatsApp will translate in real time.
That's pretty cool.
That I've been working with that. There's somebody I work with that only speaks Spanish, and we communicate fine. So, but Google Translate is also fantastic. Portuguese and Japan. So Portugal and Japan.
No, he's in South America.
South America. Okay.
Brazil, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's from Brazil, and the guy in Japan actually speaks English, I think. I guess because he answers so fast, so I don't think that he uses translator.
Fantastic. I mean, this is such a big deal. This is something that, every time I brought up INAV in the past, or some people will be like, yeah, but that horizon drift, that was one thing. Now, one thing you were mentioning was what this opens the door for as far as improvements for INAV marking. You mentioned that briefly here, but I think you went into more detail in the past.
Yeah, I'm not a developer, so I cannot speak in detail how this works specifically, or how much it improves all the other stuff that the navigation system, for example, can get. I mean, I see, okay, the horizon doesn't drift anymore, but I think there are more things involved, like a basic INS, that's an inertial navigation system that uses the accelerometer data that are actually removed from the sensor data to compensate for turns. But these removed data, on the other hand, can be used on the other hand to real-time estimate if the plane or the craft moves suddenly sideways before even the GPS recognizes the position change. And this, for example, allows much more precise navigation for quads and also for fixed wings. And recently I posted a picture in the group, not sure if I don't look for it now, where I compared in these strong wind flights with the AR Pro, the flight on the map with the 5.1 INAV, how the circuits looked like a kidney shape, because it wasn't able to properly turn and keep the distance to the loiter point constant. And then just with the new AHRS, although the new AHRS drifted some good amount downwards every time the plane goes downwind because of the sudden acceleration. We saw that in the demo videos, when we pitch up and down the nose, then the horizon starts to drift downwards and then recovers quickly. This also happens during the loiter, and even with that remaining drift, the circuits were nearly perfect. They were a little bit off center, of course, with the wind, but nearly perfect. So the navigation system already profits from the new AHRS, and I bet there is even more possible in the future, like better navigation. It will help with the path tracking feature that will also come in 6.0. Videos are following on that.
Better wind estimation.
Better wind estimation, yeah. And the better wind estimation, for example, is also needed for the path tracking feature. For example, INAV 6.0 will get the ability to not only fly directly to a waypoint. For fixed wings, that's always a problem, because the wing hits the waypoint and then it needs to turn, so it is way past this connection line between the waypoints, but then goes directly to the next one. So you have to plan that in your route if you want to do some things like area mapping. But what INAV 6.0 is capable of doing is, before it hits the turning point, it will go into the other direction, then make a turn and fly back to the path and follow the waypoint path. Not just fly towards the waypoint, but really follow the line. And that's also a new feature that will really benefit from that new AHRS.
So it sounds like INAV 6.0 is going to be the quintessential INAV that everyone should just update to this when it comes out.
Yeah, pretty much. Henry
the other thing, sorry, Brock, with the wind estimation also comes a better virtual pitot, which means, as you were saying in one of the chats, that you don't necessarily work with TPA anymore. We work with a virtual airspeed. You light bulb.
And I mean, to be honest, you cannot measure the wind in flight. That's just not possible. Even with the pitot tube, you cannot measure the wind, because you always measure only the wind direction relative to your movement direction and movement speed. So you always estimate the wind direction and the wind speed. But yes, the wind estimation will be much, much better. And in the last tests I did with Shota's build just yesterday, the wind estimator said between 5 and 10 kilometers per hour. it was a little bit gusty but very little wind. And when I looked at the weather app, it said I think 6 kilometers per hour average. I would say that's pretty precise. And this also helps for other new stuff. Oh, by the way, one interesting new feature that will also heavily rely on the new AHRS and on the better wind estimator. INAV might get dead reckoning navigation. That means INAV will be able to navigate for a certain amount of time without even having GPS. For example, you get a GPS interference, you get a disconnected GPS or some jamming going around, whatever. INAV will be able, based on compass direction, the last known, or no, I think you have to put it in the standard cruise speed at cruise throttle. The standard cruise throttle, the compass heading, and the estimated wind speed and wind direction to continue a waypoint mission for some minutes, even after a complete GPS loss.
Wow.
It can even do a return to home with a good margin if you have no GPS and or you lose GPS and you lose your RC signal. I think was it Bredhoven or Roman? I think Roman is developing.
Yeah, it's Roman.
Yeah, Roman is developing the Dead Reckoning, and he tested it so far in the hardware in the loop simulation. And by that, I think he flew like 10, 12 kilometers out with turns and everything, disabled the GPS with a dedicated test mode he implemented, and then switched off his radio, and the plane in the simulator came completely all the way back, and I think within a 200-meter radius or so.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they are absolutely crazy stuff. And this is only possible with a stable reference system and, of course, a stable wind estimation.
And actually, you just mentioned something else that even though most pilots won't use it, it's going to be very, very useful for development, and that is the simulator, where we can now use INAV to control X-plane. So if we develop something new for INAV, we can just test it at our desktop computer now. We don't actually need to go out and fly it. We just load X-plane, start flying, and test new features. And it's using all the sensors on INAV, just getting the data from X-plane. So that makes development a lot quicker and a lot easier and a lot cheaper, because we don't smash stuff to pieces.
Yeah, and not only development, also you can use it to just train yourself and get used to INAV, especially if you are a beginner. And yeah, I think beside the AHRS, for me, this is the second biggest feature for that's INAV getting right now. I think, will you also make a video about that? How to set it up?
Possibly, yeah, because now it's in the master, so
yeah,
it's quite simple. So, yeah,
makes sense. So when INAV 6.0 is released, what you will be able to, you just take any flight controller you have laying around. It can be some crap omnibus, whatever you want, and just a receiver and your radio. You plug it in via USB. You don't have to set up too much on INAV. I think just standard mixer for plane or for wing. Your radio, and then you enable the sensors you want to use in the simulation, like GPS and barometer or compass, whatever you want. They don't have to be present. You just enable them in the firmware, and that's everything you have to do on the flight controller. And after that, you can install the X-Plane flight simulator on your PC, copy the simulation RC planes into X-Plane, and as soon as you start a flight, the plugin that's included will detect, hey, there's an INAV flight controller available. Do you want to use it? And then you just click on connect, and you can really fly in the simulator the same way like you do with a real RC plane. And yeah, you can use that to set up INAV, to try out auto-tune. You even have to auto-tune the simulated plane to fly properly. So
and it will work with the demo as well. So you don't have to buy X-plane. You can just use the demo. I think it's limited to 5 minutes, isn't it? Or
15.
Something like that.
15. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So for X-Plane, you have a demo version you can download and install. You can use it for 15 minutes. Then it locks your inputs. Then you just restart it and you have another 15 minutes. And I think I used it that way like a month or so before I actually bought it when it was on discount. And it's working really well. And you can use that to you can do programming stuff, for example, to automate things like parachute drop and just put a little indicator on your OSD. You also have the full OSD available, of course, and see when the servo is released.
Sorry, yeah, it even has decaying video how far away you fly.
Yeah, you can even simulate video noise based on distance. You can simulate battery runtime, but only for a time period, not for actual voltage sag. But yeah, it's really crazy stuff, and Darren and I will make videos about that soon, I guess.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So that is unbelievable amount of development going on right now with going on with INAV 6. Do you have an idea when INAV 6 is going to officially be released? It's usually around December, right?
Yeah, it'll be around Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the new AHRS stuff is still going on, that it might be delayed if it's not fixed. If one of those both options is not completely ready then. But yeah, the plan is for December, and I hope everything is ready till then.
That's kind of a good point. I mean, sometimes I think people are expecting like we're going to come out with INAV 6 and it's going to be perfect because AHRS is the name of us. Will be ready to go and there's not going to be any bugs and it fixes. This is a major, stepping move forward. It's a quantum leap for INAV. And so, yeah, it might not go exactly as well as planned at first. There might be some bugs here and there, but it's going to get better over time. So what we might be seeing is there might be an INAV 6.1 coming out in February, March timeframe or something like that.
Might not need it, but we'll see. But
Depends.
yeah, no, it should be AHRS Albatross, shouldn't it? The new one.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, when I remember when I told Pavel about it, because he took some time off from INAV and all the RC stuff and just enjoyed flying for a while, so he didn't really notice what's going on with the new AHRS stuff. And when I recently talked to him about it, the first thing he said, this has to be thoroughly tested by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely true. I mean, we are basically playing with the core function of INAV, and everything navigation related and everything flight related relies on that. So yeah, this has to be properly tested.
It's kind of cool to watch INAV turn it to a mature platform right now, where it's, I mean, I think we all pretty much started. I remember when the group started, Darren joined maybe a month or two later. I think Mark was about 2 months in. So we've all kind of came up with INAV around the same time. And INAV 2.0, 2.1, remember those days? From where it's at, where it was then to where it's at right now, unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I started using it 1.7, 1.8, something like that, following sort of Matt's Drag the Nuts Off videos.
I think when I started, 1.9 was the latest one, and shortly after I started, 2.0 was released.
Yeah, that's about the time I started too.
Yeah, I think when I lost my AR900 back in the days when I had to fly away, I think that was just on 2.0. Because on 2.0, the option came in that allows you to continue missions without during fail-safe.
Oh, yeah, I remember that famous story of yours.
Yeah.
You finding it like 15 miles away, your plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking about parameters that are a bad idea, at least there's going to be one that's gone from INAV 6.0 as well.
Oh yeah, extra
arming safety off, gone. No longer exists.
This is great news.
It is fantastic. No one
Yeah,
can give that advice anymore. Bad advice.
and it always seems like when we were INAV 2.0, 2.1 timeframe, INAV worked, but if you're willing to jump through like a gazillion hoops, it worked somewhat okay at the time. Remember that? Mark, I think Mark was like one of the first ones who had figured out how to make it work with the gazillion hoops you had to jump through.
What exactly do you mean?
Well, I mean, when we had INAV 2.1 from back in the day, a long time ago, it worked, but you had to have everything pretty much configured dead on. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I mean, I was always annoyed when I started with INAV. At first, I thought it's normal, but then I realized, no, it's not normal that if you fly in angle mode or navigation mode, the plane bounces like 3 times after it levels out, until I realized, hey, you have to tune your rates. And this is how all started and how I dive deeper and deeper into all that tuning stuff to get it work right. But luckily, since 3.0, tuning of INAV is so much easier than it was back in the days.
Yeah, and this is kind of like it's a passion for a lot of people, and a lot of people have identified with it. And kind of in the day when we first got together, INAV was kind of a smarter version of Betaflight. It was Betaflight with GPS, and the fixed wing side of INAV was pretty much just an interesting fork, and we were kind of the renegades flying these planes around, and it wasn't really the identity. INAV was not really known as a fixed wing platform like it is now. So it's really interesting to see how the community has pushed forward the fixed wing side of INAV to the forefront of it, to the point where you pretty much think of fixed wing when you think of INAV.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, speaking of fixed wing focused, Henrik, or Grumpy Old Nerd, just made a good point. We need to get rid of that horizon mode for fixed wings.
Here we go again.
It has to be removed. I think we should make a poll on GitHub. We have now the discussions part. We can discuss it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
By the way, speaking of removing of features, one more feature gets added. Darren made that in an evening session after I asked him to better serve the plane shakers. No, I don't say it again. Do you want to say what the new feature is?
Oh, I won't say what I called the branch. Well, it's still testing. I'm still waiting for you to test it with your clouds. It works fine on small things, but basically it's a wiggle to wake up the idle throttle. So it's not actually to get the launch going, because that's still bad. But if you have an idle throttle, you can either use with a delay, without a delay, or with a wiggle. You can actually combine the delay and the wiggle, and it's just literally a wiggle on the yaw, and it will wake up the motors at the idle speed, and then you just throw it. So yeah, that's what it is.
So you just shake the ass of the plane to get it awake.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So one question that came up and it was not really answered was, is there going to be any future integration of pitot tubes into INAV?
Not yet.
No.
So there's, as far as I know, no work done on that side to this point. I mean, it still works the same. You can use it for logic condition stuff. You see the OSD element, you get the airspeed locked, and it's used for even better wind estimation, actually. The wind estimation works best, of course, with pitot tube. But overall, there is no in-the-loop throttle control, for example, in development. Maybe, I mean, when the horizon drift is fixed and more people come over then to do some more serious stuff like area mapping and waypoint mission flying and all that stuff, maybe then more developers are interested to develop these kind of advanced features and get stall speed warning ready, or in the loop throttle control for constant airspeed. That's more likely now after the core is fixed.
Okay. Yeah, that was something that Andrew Newton was asking about, and he was asking about S-Bus working in particular. The one thing I'll say, though, we're also something that Darren and I have been talking about offline a couple months back was the fact that we do not have a build, the group build like we do for OpenTX for INAV for Ethos yet, because there are a couple things we need to fix in Ethos. And it's going to be a little while longer because there's other higher priorities right now working on Ethos, but there will be a group build for Ethos on Open for INAV at some point in the future.
Yeah. Once there's a few things sorted out in Ethos, then I can get on with it. But
yeah. Also, if we have the Ethos suite where you can actually kind of, we have a simulator right now. It works really well. Maybe we should put in the show notes so people can play with it, but it only shows the screen. You don't really have the sticks per se, and you can't save it, and you can't create models with it. And that's one thing that we need to work on so that it would make it easier for you to work on this whole development. I think you did quite a bit of development with the Ethos version of this already. It was just you were waiting on a couple. In particular, you wanted to make sure that when you get out a manual that you would lose all the trims.
Yeah, and also for the Pro model, we need to be able to assign those to different things. So there's a few things that need ironing out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I have a question in the chat right now from SPV. Doesn't Wind Estimator need PTORD? Actually, it does not. I can't explain the exact math behind it, but I think I know the basic logic. You don't need a PTORD, you don't even need a compass. Just the GPS position and the GPS heading is usable to estimate the wind. But of course, with compass, it gets more precise, and with PTORD, it gets even more precise and is faster. But just for a simple explanation, let's say this, for example, is now the plane flying straight north, and you have a wind from west to east, or is it east to west?
That way to that way.
Yeah, from that way to that way. So the plane will actually pointing north, but fly like this. So what INAV sees is the plane flying like this. Now, if the plane makes a 90-degree turn, and it can determine the turn pretty precisely based on the gyro data, it makes a 90-degree turn, but from that direction it actually is pointing into that direction, and then it will fly this way. And then you have this discrepancy from the 90-degree the plane actually did versus the 110 degrees the GPS heading is now different. And by this, INAV or the algorithm can calculate that there was an offset in the ground heading from the actual nose heading of the plane. And based on that, it can, after you do a few different directions, determine from what direction the wind is coming from and how fast the wind is. This is basically a simple explanation. I don't know how the math in the background works, actually.
I call it voodoo math.
Voodoo math, yeah. Magic math.
Definitely math I didn't learn when I was in college, but yeah. So what other features are we going to see in INAV 6, you think?
Ooh, what else? I think there were a lot of pull requests merged just recently, like in the last few weeks. So let me have a quick overview. There were a few smaller interesting things still. Let's look here. I should get the right link. Here we go.
There's Darren.
Pull requests. Okay. Oh yeah, INAV gets a new name.
the most important one.
The most important one.
I still want the Motley Crue version, to be honest.
Yeah, so Pavel now made it clear that INAV is all capital letters, because before it was all over the place. Some people said INAV all capital, then INAV with a small I and only a big N, and then INAV with a big I and the rest small, and it was all over the place. And Pavel now had enough of this and changed it to all capital INAV everywhere in the code. Very important thing.
That sounds like Pavel.
Yeah, so what else? I think we already talked about the biggest things. We have, for example, multi-missions in flight switch. So if you have multiple missions planned and all stored on the EEPROM, you will be able to switch them while you are flying. So you don't have to land, switch to another one over the OSD menu, and then go fly again.
That's cool.
This is a really cool thing, especially when you fly planes like long-range crafts that can fly for 2 or 3 hours and you want to do multiple missions. It's much easier if you don't have to land. Especially it preserves power because you waste a lot of power every time you launch. Darren, did you find something interesting?
I'm just looking through the changes to configurator. Position hold for fixed wing is going to be called loiter, so it's more consistent, so it won't confuse new pilots. GPS time zone is hours instead of minutes. I'm guessing that's part of the. I should know because I did it, but I think that's part of the where you can change it to metric or imperial.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Part of that. There's an RC smoothing section that Pavel's added. Have a look.
Yeah, I think we spoke about all the really big stuff coming. Some smaller fixes in the code, some cleanup.
Yeah.
So as we wind down this hour, what have you guys been up to over the last 9 weeks since we've seen you? Darren, I'll have you go first.
I've just been doing what I normally do, to be honest. Flying, doing the YouTube, coding INAV and working. And doing all that. The walks and that stuff was probably 2 weeks just solid doing that. So to do that, I had to learn C++ as well. So learned a bit of C++. But yeah, no, just pretty much standard stuff, to be honest, and work.
And Mark, how about yourself? What have you been up to? He's on mute.
I should unmute. Yeah. I met my friend from England again. So we were flying here in Germany. Met at the model club. I crashed his plane, so that was not so cool. Or I mean, I caused his plane crashing.
Wait, how did this happen? Wait. What, don't gloss over that. What happened?
Are you mute? Oh, wait a second. I can't hear anything because my phone just took over my headphones. Okay, now.
All right, what happened? Don't gloss over that.
So yeah, Glenn and I did some flying with another friend of mine at the Model Flying Club, and we were flying formation first with 3 planes, and later we had some battery left. We wanted to make some more shots of each other. So and first I chased him. I'm used to fly pretty close to other planes. I never had a problem with that. I never crashed into one. Then we decided, yeah, let's change places so he can follow me this time and make some shots of my AR Pro. By the way, we all had our AR Pros in the air.
Cool.
So I fell back a little bit.
That's a miracle in itself, surely.
that they are flying.
You could actually launch them.
Yeah, barely. So yeah, and the maneuver was basically I said, okay, I pass you now, and he should fall back, but unfortunately he turned right first. then he was right at the edge of my screen. I was seeing him, and while I was turning and I wanted to pass under him, he went into a slight dive and we collided. It was a little bit of damage on my AR ring because his prop chopped a little bit out of my right aileron. But unfortunately, my prop hit his left ring and cut clean through his servo cable.
Oh no!
So there was no other damage in midair besides that clean cut of my prop on his servo cable, because my prop nut came loose, so it had no force anymore. But yeah, flying ring with just one servo doesn't fly well, and he spiraled down full speed into the ground, and it smashed the plane into pieces. Fortunately, most of the electronic has arrived. I think an antenna was damaged and 1 or 2 plugs. But yeah, he had a spare with him when he was here, so he could rebuild it to fly again soon. Unfortunately, he messed up the rebuild, so he soldered the servo cables back together, but then they were a little bit shorter, and he had tension on the cable, also on the plug. And when he flew and in a loop, when the wings flexed, the plug came loose, and the same happened again with the new build. And that was right why he started now his new build series, where he builds another AR Pro but with Barca ailerons. But yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, over the summer I got the opportunity to visit a lot of RC fields. There's one I visited where one pilot didn't crash one turbine jet. He crashed 2 over a course of a weekend, and it caused about $40,000 worth of damage.
Oh.
So, yeah. And I actually saw a flame out in person. I heard about these before, but it was actually, you can hear it because it sounds like a barbecue, like it just goes out. These things are loud, and then the guy was able to land this plane effectively on the field. It was a beautiful landing, but it didn't stop, and it just kept rolling, and then it finally crashed into the gate and caught on fire. So it was kind of sad to see that one as well. So
yeah, and the other thing, but by the way, we did because /7FPV just said I should tell you about it, was that we were at the Fun Park Mappen event again with this old gas power plant and this big cooling tower.
That cooling tower thing.
Yeah, and we flew there with our wings again. He was also there. Some nice chase footage, but till today I had no time to cut the footage, unfortunately, so it's not on my channel yet. But yeah, this was also a nice time. By the way, this was where Glenn came to Germany, so he was also there for 2 days.
Hey, it's interesting is like you, me, and Darren have never met in person, and as I understand it, you might have met Henrik.
I have met Henrik a few times already. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have met before and during Mappen, for example, also.
Yeah, because I when I spoke to him, he said that he was almost meeting you, and like there was one time he was running behind and he didn't have the time to meet you. So this must have been fairly recently, right?
Yeah, the Mappen event was like 5 weeks ago. Yeah, 5 weeks
just
ago.
Before the last Wingtalk, when it was supposed to be. It's the weekend before.
Yeah, that was the supposed last Wingtalk event. Yeah, that was the reason why we had to delay or to skip Wingtalk last month.
Did you have an opportunity to actually go flying with Henrik?
Yeah, of course. We flew a few weeks before that at my location, and then of course in Mappen.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, Henrik is really passionate about so many different aspects of the hobby. It's kind of interesting. He loves gliders, like the big full stop gliders. He's into cars. He's into the whole thing. So, and then he was building the entire series of Dracs, the mini Drac, the nano Drac, the full size Drac, I believe as well. I don't know how far along he's on that project.
They're probably still in boxes, knowing Henrik. He's worse than I am.
Yeah, I don't know what the actual status is, but he is in the chat. He could answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
One thing I have been doing since we've been away, I've actually been flying these things. And I've actually joined the pros now because I've actually snapped an arm.
Oh.
Darren, 1 second. Your camera feed is frozen again. It happened a few times. Now it works again. Okay.
Yeah. I've broken an arm, so I've joined the proper quad flyers club now.
Yeah, I also recently killed a quad again. What was the reason for the crash? Can't remember anymore. It was a very bad reason. Yeah, of course, the VTX cable came loose.
Mine was just bad piloting.
No, the VTX cable came loose, and after about 10 or 15 seconds, the VTX overheated, and I have seen nothing anymore, even when I was close. And it also destroyed my GoPro.
Oh. How many times have you destroyed that GoPro, though? Is the GoPro Session 5?
Nah, it's that's my old Hero 6, and I think that was the first time that I completely killed it. And before, I think a few months after I got it, I just had a broken screen, but I got it replaced.
Oh, interesting. Have you noticed the one thing here in the United States, what I've been hearing from a number of retailers is that for whatever reason, the entire drone market is just dried up as far as retail sales are concerned, and to the point where a lot of the retailers are discontinuing the drones in the United States. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world.
Well, here in Europe, they are not that crazy. Or should I say that stupid? I mean, they are still pretty stupid when it comes to drone rules, but not as bad as the US currently.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I mean, all this remote ID is total nonsense in my opinion. So I mean, everyone knows that it's nonsense because it's not practical to even consider putting these remote ID stuff on any craft you build.
You know, that's one thing I will say is that from the start to the finish. Now, I've talked to people who fly planes and quads, and talked to the commercial UAV and the military UAV guys, and the one thing we all agree on is they absolutely hate that law, the remote ID law, and just a number of these guys are like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I don't care. And in the United States, we have laws, and especially during the COVID lockdown, we had, you know, the actual we'd have health departments saying that here's the laws, you know, if you don't wear a mask, you can get arrested. And you would have police departments saying, we're not going to go out and arrest people, you know. So there's interesting that some laws that are enforced and some laws that aren't enforced. And we're starting to see that. And I kind of have the feeling that the
FRID?
No. FAA is kind of, their hands are a bit tied with this whole remote ID thing because of the national, basically national, escaping me now. And this is the problem with getting the COVID shot the day before you do Wingtalk, is then all of a sudden your brain turns to mush. But anyway, no, it was, it's basically Homeland Security. It was pretty much putting down the gauntlet of like this, we need to have this, we need to have remote ID. And I actually, one night, I don't know why, I turned on C-SPAN when I was in a hotel and they had a UAV meeting it was a congressional hearing, and they had people, and these are serious congressmen in the United States, asking the people, they had both the FAA and they had Homeland Security, you know, getting grilled. And they started asking questions. How many drones have you shot down near airports? That was one of the questions. And they're like, well, not really anything. I don't know. Why haven't we shot down drones? This should be happening all the time. We should be shooting down. And I'm like, oh my God, you are such an idiot. You know, it's
because so, there are none.
Yeah.
That's the reason why. There are none.
There are none, right? But they're really hoping like we can have like here's a DJI drone we shot down 1 mile away from the airport, and we're doing something about this. And I don't know. I honestly almost feel bad for the FAA and, because they're in this situation. What I can think of is that when you get something that rises to the level, and pretty much the way I see the FAA is that as long as you're not really causing problems, they somewhat look the other way. But when you do something stupid and your drone ends up in the airport, oh yeah, this is, remote ID is going to be something else that they add on to all the fines. It's a minimum of $25,000 fine when you screw up like that. So,
the thing is though, unless you've got a recording device on the plane, how will they know? Unless you've got remote ID and they know where the planes come from, how will they know to issue the fine? This is why it's so stupid, really.
Just remember one thing: if you bench tested anything at home, don't forget to delete the logs from the SD card.
I don't have an SD card. A transmitter.
No, transmitter is
not relevant. I don't use black box.
Yeah, you don't use, but if you use black box, just don't forget to delete the logs from your bench tests, because the GPS coordinates from your home are there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
See, what I do is I put Henrik's name and phone number and email address on the plane. And I figured, he'd be like, somebody found a plane in Chino Hills and they're calling me about it. Do you know anything about this, Steve?
Yeah, totally valid that he flies a 4,000-mile long-range plane. or 8,000.
That's great. Well, with that, I think this is a good opportunity for us to wrap up Wingtalk early for a change, and somewhat early. We're about 8 minutes over. So what a great show we had today. I mean, we really feature-packed. It was great to have everyone back together once again. This was great to have Leon. Great news about INAV 6. So can't wait for the next Wingtalk. We're going to have a scary Halloween where we have to all dress in costume in order to be on the show. And we'll look forward to seeing you in probably, 3 weeks?
Yeah, probably. About that.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Well, bye, everybody.
See you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.